Good morning. Thank you for inviting me back. When I left here in 2005, I had completed the Harvard Combined Med-Peds program and had my MPH from the School of Public Health. And whenever you leave Harvard, one feels like people look at you as if you're departing for parts unknown. But I did come back and did return, and I'm happy to be here. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Crisis Text Line, which is a volunteer-run crisis hotline purely on a text platform. So my presentation will be slightly different because I really want everyone to have an understanding of what it is that we do and then how we use language in that context and data in that context. As we know, mental illness is pervasive. There are people struggling with depression, anxiety, all sorts of mental illnesses. But do you know who might be next to you in crisis? We are a free 24/7 confidential crisis support hotline that's done completely via text messaging. We have volunteer crisis counselors, one of whom is actually in the audience today, who are on our platforms supervised by mental health professionals. Any individual can text 741-741 and be received by initially an automated response and then through connectivity with a volunteer. We launched quietly 5 years ago in Chicago and El Paso, and very quickly through word of mouth, we're in all 295 area codes in the United States. We've trained actually over 11,000 people as crisis counselors, and we've had 63 million individual conversations to date, with an expansion and growth that's anticipated in the next 4 years. 4 times the growth that we have now. The top issues that we address are depression, suicide, self-harm, anxiety, relationships. 65% of the people who share something on text with our volunteers are sharing something that they've never shared with anyone else before. So how did we start? We were not started as a mental health organization. We were started and built up around data and technology. Our founder, Nancy Lublin, was previously with DoSomething.org, which is a volunteer-based network to help really young people engage in volunteerism. She found that there were some off-sequence texts being sent in, one of which was a young person reporting that she was being raped by her father every night. And that was the prompt and the impetus to develop a crisis text line to help people who were willing to disclose crises via text. So we were started and continue to build upon a technology, data, and product foundation, then entering into the mental health space. So we want to help people who are in pain with as little friction as possible. This is not, there's no intake survey, it's not an app. People can access us, like I said, through text, Facebook Messenger, Kik, and we are available to everyone anonymously as long as they have a cell phone and are available to text. We use our algorithms to review for severity, and I'll get into that soon. But a person texts in, there's an automated response, and the crisis counselor is there within moments to start texting with this person. Messages on average are 40 to 60 messages, 45 minutes about on average, to bring someone from their crisis moment to a cooler calm. So it's really crisis intervention via text. Some of our findings: we've handled over 63 million individual messages thus far, which average out, we've handled about 2 million conversations, full conversations in 5 years. Only a handful of people have ever asked to call us by phone. Most of our messages, 45% of them, are focused on suicide or depression. We handle active rescues. I will talk about that in a moment. But on average, our texters are connected with a counselor within 39 seconds. We're reaching diverse populations through text. We're over-indexing for minorities and for LGBTQ populations. Our data shows we've done over 900,000 conversations in 2017. We've had over 507,000 texters on our platform. 86% of them report feeling better after the conversation. 75% of our texters are reached in under 5 minutes, and those who are at higher risk for suicide, 90% of those are reached in under 5 minutes. On average, we have about 3,000 to 4,000 active crisis counselors, our volunteers, and we had over 100,000 conversations in the month of December of 2017. Our data is very accessible on crisistrends.org, which is our outward-facing website. Anyone can access that data. What have we learned through our data? Like I said, depression, anxiety, relationship, suicide are the top issues. When texters and our counselors are surveyed at the end of the conversation, we are continuously gathering this data. Crises peak from 7 a.m. Sunday morning to 7 a.m. Monday morning each week. Age-wise, we're not just for those who are young and digital natives. 25% of our users are over the age of 25. These texters are having valuable experiences with our crisis counselor as well. We have volunteers of all ages. We have texters of all ages. What we did find interestingly is that young people, we have a cohort of texters who are under the age of 13 who really over-index for self-harm and thoughts of suicide. So what have we learned through our data and detection, detection and intervention? When we first started, we utilized and used our algorithms to detect in these conversations keywords that we thought would help us predict what would be high risk. So texters who would be in need of emergency services, higher risk of suicide. So we started with some of the obvious words: die, cut, milligram, overdose. That was our first version. Now, our data scientists are constantly iterating and looking at what is the data, what is the language that texters are using. So what we found when we were first flagging conversations for die, suicide, overdose, those were letting us know who were the higher risk texters. But then we started to discover that there were thousands of other what we call egrams, bigrams, and trigrams that were more powerful and more predictive of thoughts of suicide. Because these were some of the problems we were running into. People where the algorithm would pick up die, kill myself. We weren't able to then parse out someone who says, I don't want to die, I don't want to kill myself, as someone who's not necessarily high risk. So we only had 53% accuracy using that initial word, that initial version with the words that I'd identified. So in our second version, we found 10,000 and more n-grams. We found that, surprisingly, hashtag KMS, kill myself, was a higher predictor of suicide or a high-risk texter. The crying, frowny face emoji was a high predictor. So through our detection, we found that medications, ibuprofen, Excedrin, acetaminophen, were actually 5 times more predictive when identified within a text conversation than the word suicide. So someone who texts in and identifies that they have Tylenol or Motrin easily accessible is actually someone, and they're discussing it, is actually someone who could be at higher risk than just someone who texts in saying they had thoughts of suicide, because they have not only the thought, but they have the plan and the means very accessible in their bathroom and their medicine cabinet. So we found words like noose, cord, revolver, and gun obviously were very predictive. And then 3 times as predictive than the word suicide were Benadryl, strangle, jump, overdosing. So really our data helped us to inform what it is we needed to look for in order to identify early on in a conversation through our algorithms who our high-risk texters would be. This gave us 86% accuracy. When a volunteer responds to a texter, what are the words then that we found are most supportive and most helpful in de-escalation? Smart, proud, and brave. So it's identifying for a texter their positive qualities and highlighting those as we help them to de-escalate. We started to look at feeling words, reflecting the feelings of a texter back to them. So if a texter said, I had a really bad day, our volunteer would be trained to respond with a sentence such as, it sounds like you had a horrible day. So magnifying, recognizing, empathizing what our texters are saying and reflecting that language back to them. So validations, part of the training that our volunteers receive are around what have we found through our data are the most effective validations. So our 5 most effective words we found were reasonable, normal, makes sense, understandable, I see. So if our volunteer responds with what you're saying sounds very normal, the feelings that you're having are very normal or understandable, people feel heard and they're able then to open up and explore and reveal what it is that they're feeling and the source of their crises. We also found that it's best to avoid, obviously, the why, more accusatory sounding questions. We use how, when, and what to open up, to explore with a texter what it is that is going on for them, and that makes them more in control of the conversation. When we find that a texter is at imminent risk of suicide, so if they have an ideation, a means, a plan, and a time frame within the next 24 to 48 hours, we actually dispatch law enforcement. So based on their phone number, we contact the local PSAP, the local 911 call center. They are then able to geolocate the texter based on their cell phone. We found that over 1% of our conversations are actually resulting in emergency service intervention. We have interrupted suicides. We have notified parents that their child is in the house attempting suicide when the police arrive on the scene. And I'm running out of time, but basically data makes us better. As I said, we do stack ranking. We are continuously evaluating, assessing, and using the data that we have based on the language of the texts. Again, over 66 million messages, crisistrends.org, and we collaborate. So what's beautiful about our data is that we have the ability to as opposed to CDC, NIH, our data is real-time, continuous. And what we find is that our data correlates very closely to what CDC and NIH and NIMH data reveals as well, except we can say within the course of a day, a week, a month, these are the trends for any given area, any given area code. It's real time, and we have incredible volume and velocity in our ability to combine both the data and the technology to serve people in need. Thank you.